On the morning of June 14, 2019, a man named David Chen was drinking his coffee on the front porch of his California when he noticed a moving truck pull up to the house directly across the street. The house had been vacant for nearly 3 months, ever since the elderly couple who lived there moved to a retirement home in Arizona. So naturally, David was curious to see who his new neighbors would be. Over the next few hours, he watched as a young family unloaded their belongings. There was a father who looked to be in his mid-30s, a mother around the same age, and 2 children who couldn't have been older than 7 and 9. They seemed normal enough. Friendly, even. The father waved at David a few times while carrying boxes, and at one point, the mother walked across the street to introduce herself. "Hi, I'm Rebecca," she said with a warm smile. "We just moved in. This is such a beautiful neighborhood." David shook her hand and welcomed her to the street. "I'm David. If you guys need anything, don't hesitate to ask. There's a great pizza place about 10 minutes from here, and the schools around here are pretty decent if you're looking." Rebecca thanked him and mentioned that her husband's name was Marcus, and their kids were named Tyler and Emma. She explained that they'd moved from Oregon for Marcus's job. Everything about the conversation felt perfectly ordinary. After chatting for a few more minutes, Rebecca went back to unpacking, and David went inside to finish his work for the day. Over the next 2 weeks, David saw the family regularly. Marcus would leave for work around 7:30 every morning. Rebecca often took the kids to the park down the street. They even invited David over for dinner one evening, and he found them to be genuinely kind people. Tyler, the younger boy, was obsessed with dinosaurs and wouldn't stop talking about a T-Rex toy he'd just gotten. Emma, the older sister, was quieter but polite. It was the kind of wholesome, normal interaction that made David feel good about his neighborhood. But then something strange happened. On July 2nd, just over 2 weeks after the family moved in, David woke up to the sound of a moving truck outside. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe someone else on the street was moving. But when he looked out his window, his stomach dropped. The moving truck was parked in front of Rebecca and Marcus's house, and there were people unloading furniture. David rubbed his eyes, thinking he must still be half asleep. But no. There were movers carrying a couch up the driveway. A different couch. Not the one he'd seen in their living room just 3 days ago when he walked past their open front door. Confused, David threw on a shirt and walked outside. Standing in the driveway across the street was a man David had never seen before. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with graying hair and a thick beard. Next to him stood a woman who looked about the same age and 2 teenage boys who were helping unload boxes. David approached cautiously. "Hey, excuse me. Are you guys moving in here?" The man turned and smiled. "Yeah, we are. Just got the keys yesterday. I'm Frank, by the way." "This is my wife, Linda." David stared at him, completely lost. "Wait, hold on. There's already a family living here. Rebecca and Marcus. They moved in 2 weeks ago." Frank's smile faded into a look of confusion. "I'm sorry, who?" "Rebecca and Marcus," David repeated, his voice a little firmer now. "They have 2 kids, Tyler and Emma. They've been living here since mid-June." Frank exchanged a glance with his wife, then looked back at David. "I think you might have the wrong house, man. We bought this place a month ago. It's been sitting empty since we closed on it. We're the first ones moving in." David felt his chest tighten. "No." Linda, the wife, stepped forward with a concerned look. "Are you feeling okay? Maybe you're thinking of a different house?" David pointed firmly at the house. "This house. Right here. I watched them move in. I helped Rebecca carry a box inside on the first day." Frank's expression shifted from confusion to something closer to pity. "Look, I don't know what to tell you, but we've owned this house for 5 weeks. Nobody's been living here. The realtor gave us a walkthrough last month and the place was completely empty. Still is, aside from what we're bringing in now." David felt dizzy. He turned and walked back to his house without saying another word. Once inside, he immediately called his wife, Jennifer, who was visiting her sister in San Diego. "John, something really weird is happening. What's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. David explained everything. The family that moved in, the conversations, the dinner. And now, the new family claiming they were the first ones to move in. Jennifer was silent for a moment. Then she said,
David, are you sure you're remembering this right?
"You've been working a lot lately. Maybe you saw someone visiting the house and your brain just..." "No," David interrupted. "I know what I saw. I talked to them multiple times. I shook Marcus's hand. I ate Rebecca's cooking."
This isn't a memory issue.
Jennifer sighed.
Okay. Just
try to stay calm. Maybe ask some of the other neighbors if they saw them too. David hung up and immediately walked 2 doors down to his neighbor, Mr. Calloway, an older man who spent most of his day sitting on his porch. "Hey, Mr. Calloway," David said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Do you remember that family that moved into the house across from me a couple weeks ago? The ones with the 2 kids?" Mr. Calloway squinted. "What family?" David's heart sank. "The Morrisons. Rebecca and Marcus. They had a boy and a girl." Mr. Calloway shook his head slowly. "I don't know who you're talking about, son. That house has been empty for months. I was starting to think nobody would ever buy it." David felt like the ground was falling out from under him. "You're telling me you didn't see a moving truck there on June 14th? You didn't see a family unloading boxes?"
But I did see one this morning. Nice couple.
They've got 2 teenage boys." David walked away without responding. His mind was racing. He went home and tore through his phone, looking for any photos he might have taken. Surely he'd snapped a picture of the neighborhood at some point in the last 2 weeks. Something, anything. But there was nothing. No photos of Rebecca or Marcus. No pictures of the kids. It was as if they'd never existed. Desperate, David walked back across the street. Frank was still outside, directing the movers. David approached him again, this time pulling out his phone. "Look, I know this sounds insane," David said, "but I need to see inside the house." Frank frowned. "Why?" "Because I need to prove to myself that I'm not losing my mind." Frank hesitated, then sighed. "All right, fine. But make it quick." David followed Frank inside. The layout was exactly as he remembered. Same floors, same walls, same staircase. But everything else was different. The furniture was different. The paint colors were different.
There were no toys scattered on the floor, no family photos on the walls.
No trace of Rebecca, Marcus, Tyler, or Emma.
David walked into the kitchen, where he'd sat just days ago eating spaghetti with the family. The table was gone. The chairs were gone. Everything was gone.
He felt his hands start to shake. "This doesn't make sense." Frank put a hand on David's shoulder. "Hey, man. I think you should go home and get some rest. Maybe call a doctor or something." David pulled away and walked out of the house, his mind spiraling. Back at home, he sat at his kitchen table and tried to think logically. Maybe he was experiencing some kind of mental break. Maybe the stress from work had finally caught up to him. Maybe Jennifer was right. But then he remembered something. The dinner. Rebecca had given him a container of leftover spaghetti to take home. He put it in his fridge. David shot up from his chair and ran to the refrigerator. He yanked open the door and scanned every shelf. And there, in the back, was a small plastic container with red sauce inside. His hands trembled as he pulled it out. He opened the lid and stared at the cold pasta. It was real. It was physically real, but if the food was real, then where was the family? David spent the rest of the day searching online for any record of Rebecca and Marcus Morrison. He checked social media, public records, anything, but there was nothing. No Marcus Morrison working in Riverside. No Rebecca Morrison with 2 kids named Tyler and Emma. It was as if they'd been erased. That night, David couldn't sleep. He stood by his bedroom window, staring at the house across the street. The lights were on inside, and he could see Frank's family moving around, unpacking boxes, settling in. And then, just for a moment, David saw something that made his blood run cold. Standing in the upstairs window of the house, staring directly back at him, was Tyler, the 7-year-old boy with the dinosaur obsession. He wasn't moving. He wasn't blinking. He was just standing there, perfectly still, with a blank expression on his face. David stumbled backward, his heart pounding. He blinked, and when he looked again, Tyler was gone. He never saw Rebecca, Marcus, Tyler, or Emma again. But every now and then, late at night, David swears he can still hear the faint sound of children laughing coming from across the street. And Frank's family? They have no children.